You probably drove past it last week and didn't even look twice. The Red Lobster on the edge of town, the one with the big plastic lobster sign, sitting dark in the middle of a half-empty parking lot. You figured it was closed for renovations. It wasn't. It's gone, and it's not coming back, and it is not alone. What I'm about to show you is 12 of the biggest chains in America, and every one of them is bleeding out right now. But here's the part that kept me up at night. These are not 12 separate accidents. They are 12 symptoms of the same disease, and almost nobody is saying it out loud. I'm not an analyst. I'm not an insider. I'm a guy in his late 50s who has been eating at these places and shopping at these stores my whole life. I just started paying attention, and once I saw it, I could not unsee it. I remember the exact moment it hit me. It was a Tuesday, and I drove to the Big Lots on Route 9 where my wife and I bought our first set of dishes back in 1991, and the windows were papered over. And something in my gut said, this is not random, so I started keeping a list. I started writing down dates and numbers, and by the end of this video, I'm going to show you the one thread that ties every single one of these chains together. It's hiding inside a bankruptcy filing from May of 2024, and once you see it, you will never look at an empty store the same way again. Let me start where I started. Let me start with Red Lobster. For a lot of us, Red Lobster was the special occasion place. Not fancy, but a step up. It's where you went for an anniversary, or after a graduation, or when the relatives came to town. At its peak, Red Lobster had more than 700 locations across the country, and Cheddar Bay biscuits were practically a national treasure. Then, in May of 2024, the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They closed more than 90 restaurants almost overnight. People blamed the endless shrimp promotion. You probably heard that story, the one where customers ate so much $20 shrimp that the company went broke. That's the story they wanted you to believe, and it's almost completely false. Because here's the thing that didn't add up to me. A company does not collapse from selling too much food. The shrimp deal lost them about $11 million. That's a rounding error for a chain that size. So I kept pulling the thread, and what I found underneath Red Lobster was the first clue. Somebody had quietly sold off the land underneath those restaurants years before. Hold on to that, because you are going to see it again. But before we get there, let me show you the next domino, because it fell almost the same week. Big Lots. The place I told you about, where we bought our dishes. Big Lots was the king of the bargain hunt. You went in for paper towels and came out with a recliner and a box of off-brand cereal. At its height, Big Lots ran more than 1,400 stores in 48 states. In September of 2024, Big Lots filed for bankruptcy. By early 2025, they had announced they were closing all of their remaining stores, every single one, more than 900 of them at the end. Hundreds of thousands of square feet of American retail just switched off. And the official explanation? They said it was inflation. They said customers had less money for discretionary items. Now, that's partly true, and I'm not going to insult you by pretending the economy is fine. But discount stores are supposed to do better when money gets tight. That's the whole point of a discount store. So, why did the bargain chain die in the exact moment people needed bargains the most? The same shadow was sitting behind Big Lots that I'd seen behind Red Lobster. And once you've seen it twice, you start looking for it everywhere. Therefore, I went looking, and the next place I looked was the party aisle, Party City. If you've thrown a kid's birthday in the last 30 years, you've stood under those fluorescent lights surrounded by walls of balloons and plastic tablecloths. Party City was the biggest party goods retailer in the country, with around 800 stores at its peak, and basically no real competition. In December of 2024, Party City told its corporate employees the company was shutting down, going out of business. They had actually filed for bankruptcy once before, back in 2023, climbed out of it, and then collapsed again barely a year later. $1,200 was roughly what some longtime workers got told they had for severance before the doors closed. Thousands of people lost their jobs right before the holidays. Now think about that pattern with me. Red Lobster, Big Lots, Party City. 3 completely different businesses. Seafood, discount goods, balloons. They have nothing in common on the surface. Different customers, different products, different parts of your town. But all 3 filed for bankruptcy inside the same 12-month window. All 3 had been around for decades, and all 3 when you dig past the headlines, were not killed by their customers. They were killed by something on the inside, something in the paperwork. And right around here is where I stopped believing in coincidence. If you want to go deeper than this video can take you, I put everything I found, the timelines, the ownership trails, the bankruptcy documents broken down in plain language into a series of books called The Collapse, Dead Weight, and Collapse Cash. No jargon, no financial degree required, just the full picture laid out the way I wish someone had laid it out for me. You can find the details in the description below. I wrote them for people exactly like you, people who trust what they see with their own eyes and want to understand why the parking lots keep going dark. But before we get to the playbook in full, let me show you what I mean by the weight these companies are carrying. Because here's what I finally understood, and this is the part that changes how you watch the rest of this. None of these companies were really owned by the people running the restaurants or stocking the shelves. They were owned by investment firms, private equity firms, and those firms had a specific playbook, the same playbook, used over and over again. Let me explain how the playbook works, because once you understand it, the next 9 chains are going to make your blood run cold. A private equity firm buys a healthy, popular company, usually using mostly borrowed money. Then, here's the trick. They put that borrowed debt onto the company they just bought, not onto themselves. So now, the beloved chain you grew up with owes hundreds of millions of dollars it never used to owe. Then the firm often sells off the most valuable thing the company has, which is usually the land and the buildings, and pockets the cash. After that, the company that used to own its own stores now has to rent them. It pays rent forever on property it used to own free and clear. That's the shadow I kept seeing. That's what was behind Red Lobster. Back in 2014, a firm called Golden Gate Capital bought Red Lobster, and to help pay for the deal, the real estate under those restaurants was sold off in a sale-leaseback arrangement worth around $1.5 billion. Overnight, Red Lobster went from owning its locations to renting them, paying rent that climbed year after year. So when business dipped even a little, there was no cushion left. The shrimp didn't kill Red Lobster. The rent did. And the rent was a choice somebody made to get rich. Now watch how many times you see this exact same move. Take Toys R Us, because it was the warning nobody listened to. Toys R Us was the cathedral of childhood. Jeffrey the giraffe. Aisles taller than your dad. In 2005, a group of investment firms bought Toys R Us in a leveraged buyout worth about $6.5 billion, and they loaded the company with billions in debt. For more than a decade, Toys R Us was spending around $400 million a year just on interest payments. Just on interest. That's money that could have fixed the stores, lowered the prices, fought back against the competition. In 2017, Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy, and by 2018, every store in America was closed. Around 30,000 people lost their jobs. The company was actually still profitable on its actual toy sales. It was making money selling toys. It just couldn't survive the debt that was strapped to its back by the people who supposedly owned it. Therefore, the question I had to ask was simple and ugly. How many other chains are walking around right now with that same weight on their backs, just waiting to go down? The answer turned out to be more than I wanted to find. Let me take you into the pharmacy, because this one touches almost every family in America. Rite Aid. For generations, this was where you picked up your prescriptions, your kids' cough syrup, your reading glasses. At its peak, Rite Aid operated more than 4,700 stores. It was one of the 3 giant drugstore chains that covered the whole country. Rite Aid filed for bankruptcy in October of 2023, restructured, and then did something almost unheard of. It filed for bankruptcy again in 2025. 2 bankruptcies in under 2 years. They have closed hundreds upon hundreds of locations, and in a lot of small towns, when the Rite Aid closed, it left what people call a pharmacy desert. No place for miles to fill a prescription. Now, Rite Aid had its own troubles, lawsuits and bad management. I won't pretend otherwise. But underneath it all was that same crushing pile of debt, billions of dollars of it, the kind that builds up when a company is treated like a poker chip instead of a place where human beings buy medicine. But it's not just Rite Aid in that aisle. Look one shelf over. Walgreens. This is the giant, the one you'd assume is untouchable. Walgreens announced it would close around 1,200 stores over a 3-year stretch, including hundreds in just the first year. And then in 2025 came the real headline. Walgreens, a company that had been publicly traded for nearly a century, agreed to be taken private in a deal with a private equity firm called Sycamore Partners, valued at up to around $23.5 billion. Did you catch that? The same kind of firm that I just showed you hollowing out Red Lobster and Toys R Us now owns one of the 2 biggest pharmacy chains in America? The fox didn't just get into the henhouse. The fox bought the henhouse, the hens, and the land it sits on. And that's when my stomach really dropped, because I realized this isn't history. This is happening right now, to the stores you used yesterday. So let me keep going down my list, because the pattern just gets louder. Joann Fabrics. If you sew, quilt, or craft, this was your second home. Joann was around for more than 80 years, with over 800 stores. Private equity firm Leonard Green and Partners took Joann private back in 2011. Joann filed for bankruptcy in March of 2024, climbed out, and then filed again in January of 2025. Sound familiar? 2 bankruptcies, barely a year apart, just like Rite Aid. And this time, the result was final. Joann announced it was closing all of its stores, every location, gone. A whole community of people who quilt blankets for newborns and sew costumes for school plays, and the place they relied on was strip-mined down to nothing. Therefore, let's walk back into the restaurant, because the dinner table got hit just as hard. TGI Fridays. The place with the striped awnings and the flare on the walls, where a generation of us had our first legal drink. TGI Fridays once had more than 600 locations in the United States. In November of 2024, TGI Fridays filed for bankruptcy. They had already been closing dozens of restaurants through the year, and the count of shuttered locations climbed into the hundreds. And what was sitting behind Fridays? Private investment ownership and a load of debt, plus failed deals to be bought out. The casual dining chain that defined the 1980s and 1990s was being passed around between financial owners like a used car, each one trying to squeeze a little more out of it before it died. But Fridays had company at the bottom, because the whole casual dining row was on fire. Red Robin, Bertucci's, which filed for bankruptcy more than once. Bob Evans. Hooters, which filed for bankruptcy in 2025, a chain that had been around since 1983. Denny's, that 24-hour diner that was always just there, announced it was closing around 150 locations. One after another, the places where regular families could afford to sit down and be served a hot meal, all wobbling at the same time. Now stop and think about what that means for you, because this is the part nobody on the news connects for you, and it's the part that actually hits your wallet. When these chains die, you don't just lose a place to eat, you lose the competition that kept prices down. Every time a Red Lobster or a TGI Fridays closes, the restaurants left standing have a little less reason to keep their prices fair. That's why your check feels higher every single year. It's not only inflation, it's that the field of competitors is being thinned out on purpose by people who never cared about the food, and it goes way past dinner. Think about the land. When one of these stores closes in your town, you get a dead building on your main road. An empty box that brings down the value of everything around it. The hardware store next door loses the foot traffic. The diner across the street loses the lunch crowd. One closure becomes 3. I watched it happen on Route 9, and I bet if you look around your own town, you've watched it too. And here's the cruelest part for the people who work there. When a private equity firm runs one of these companies into bankruptcy, the workers are usually last in line. The lenders get paid. The firm has often already pulled its money out through special dividends and fees. But the cashier who gave that store 20 years, she gets a fraction of the severance she was promised. If she gets anything at all, the pension she counted on can end up frozen or cut. That is not a side effect. That is how the machine is built. So now you understand the stakes. This isn't nostalgia. This is your prices, your town, your neighbor's job, and maybe your own retirement. Let me show you how high up this goes, because the biggest names in America are on this list too. Macy's, the store with the Thanksgiving parade, the anchor of 1,000 shopping malls. Macy's announced it would close around 150 stores, roughly a third of its locations, by 2026. When a Macy's closes, it usually kills the entire mall around it, because Macy's was the anchor that brought everyone else in. So one closure quietly takes a dozen smaller stores down with it. JCPenney. Another anchor, another giant of small town and suburban America. JCPenney filed for bankruptcy in 2020, weighed down by billions in debt, much of it piled on during years of financial ownership and failed turnaround schemes. It survived, barely, bought up by its own landlords, but a shadow of what it was, Sears. I have to say this name even though it hurts. Sears built the American middle class. You could once buy an entire house out of the Sears catalog. At its peak, Sears had thousands of stores and was the biggest retailer on earth. A hedge fund manager named Eddie Lampert merged Sears with Kmart and ran the combined company for years. During that time, the most valuable real estate, the buildings and the land, got spun off into a separate company that Lampert also had a stake in. The stores then paid rent to that company. Does that move sound familiar yet? Sears filed for bankruptcy in 2018. Today, there are only a tiny handful of Sears stores left in the entire United States, from a company that once had around 3,500. That is the same play, the same sale of the real estate, the same rent trap. From a seafood restaurant to the company that built American retail, it is the exact same set of fingerprints. Therefore, let me name the rest of the bodies, because the discount aisle is collapsing too, and that one hurts the people with the least. Family Dollar. Dollar Tree bought Family Dollar back in 2015 for around $8.5 billion, and it never went well. In 2024, the company announced it would close roughly 1,000 Family Dollar stores. Then in 2025, Dollar Tree sold Family Dollar off to private investment firms for about $1 billion, a fraction of what it paid. These are the stores in the poorest neighborhoods, the ones where people without a car buy their groceries. And they're being shuffled around and shut down by the thousands, 99-cents only stores. This chain, huge across the West and Southwest, with around 370 stores, announced in 2024 it was closing every single location and filed for bankruptcy. And who had owned 99 cents only? It had been bought years earlier in a leveraged buyout by private investment firms. Same story, same ending. Now, let me pull all of this together, because I promised you at the start I'd show you the one thread, and I found it inside an actual document, and I need you to see it the way I saw it. When Red Lobster filed for bankruptcy in May of 2024, the court documents became public. Anyone can read them, and buried in those filings is the story of the real estate. The detail that, in 2014, to fund the buyout, the land under hundreds of restaurants was sold off, and the company was forced to lease back the very ground it used to own. The filing lays out how those rising rent payments that existed only because of a financial deal, helped strangle the company. The shrimp got the headlines. The real cause was sitting in the paperwork the whole time. And once I had that document in my hands, I went back through every chain on my list, and the same shape appeared again and again. Toys R Us, loaded with $6.5 billion in buyout debt. Sears, with its real estate spun off and rented back. Walgreens, sold to Sycamore Partners. Family Dollar, dumped onto private investors. Joann and Rite Aid, each one bankrupt, twice in 2 years. 99 cents only, a leveraged buyout that ended in total liquidation. It is not 12 different stories. It is one story told 12 times. Here is how the whole thing actually works, now that you've seen the pieces. A private equity firm finds a chain that you and I love and trust. A chain with two things the firm wants: steady money coming in the door and valuable real estate sitting under its feet. The firm buys it, mostly with borrowed money, and then attaches that borrowed money to the company itself, like strapping a backpack full of bricks onto a swimmer. Then it sells the real estate and takes the cash. It collects management fees every year. It pays itself special dividends. For a few years, on paper, everything looks fine. But the company is now renting its own buildings and drowning in interest payments. So, the first time the economy hiccups, the first time a winter is slow or gas prices spike, there's no cushion left. There's no owned property to borrow against. There's no savings. There's only debt and rent. And the company that survived the Great Depression, that survived 2 world wars, that survived every recession for 80 years suddenly can't survive a slow quarter, it files for bankruptcy. The workers lose everything. You lose your store. And the firm? The firm already took its money out years ago. It walks away richer and goes looking for the next one. That's the thread. That's the shadow I kept seeing behind every dark window. It was never really about your shopping habits. You did not kill these stores by buying online. They were bled out from the inside, deliberately, by people whose names you'll never see on the door. And I want to be fair, because I promised you I would be. Not every closure is private equity. Some chains made genuinely bad decisions. Shopping moved online. Costs really did rise. I'm not telling you the world stood still while only the villains moved. But when you see the same exact financial maneuver, the loaded debt, the sold-off land, the rent trap, the double bankruptcy, behind chain after chain after chain, across food and pharmacy and clothing and toys and dollar stores, you are not looking at 12 coincidences. You are looking at a method. So what does this mean for you? Sitting there, watching the storefronts on your own main street go dark one by one? It means the empty buildings are not a sign that your town did something wrong. They are not a sign that you stopped spending enough. It means a kind of ownership came to America that treats a beloved store the way a butcher treats a steer, useful for the meat on its bones, and then discarded. It means your prices will keep climbing as competitors vanish. It means more pharmacy deserts, more food deserts, more dead malls. It means when you hear that a chain you grew up with is closing, your first question should not be, what did the customers do wrong? Your first question should be, who owned it? And what did they pull out before they let it die? I started this with a list, scribbled on a notepad, after I saw papered over windows at the Big Lots, where my wife and I bought our first dishes. I thought I was just feeling nostalgic. I thought I was just an older guy missing the way things used to be. But the more dates I wrote down, the more bankruptcy filings I read, the more I realized I wasn't mourning the past. I was watching a robbery in slow motion, in plain daylight, with all of us standing right there. You are the kind of person who trusts what you see with your own two eyes over what a press release tells you. You saw the empty lot. You felt that something was off before anyone explained it. You were right. Your gut was right the whole time, and now you have the document and the names to prove it. So, here's what I want from you. Tell me which one hit you the hardest. Was it Red Lobster, where you had your anniversary dinners? Was it the Sears where your dad bought his tools? Was it the Toys R Us where you stood as a kid? Tell me the name of the store in your town whose dark windows first made you suspicious that something bigger was going on. Write it down in the comments below. I read them, and I'm building the next list from what you tell me. This audience doesn't usually speak up, so I'm asking you directly. Leave that comment. And if you're the kind of person who'd rather see the pattern than be told to ignore it, come stand with the rest of us who are piecing this together. Subscribe, because we are not done. There's another chain I'm investigating right now, one you probably ate at this month and assumed was perfectly healthy, and the ownership behind it leads somewhere I did not expect. I'll show you what I found next time. Until then, keep your eyes on the parking lots. They're telling you the truth before anyone else will. Remember that empty Red Lobster, that dark Big Lots? I told you one thread ties all these collapses together. Inside the circle, I pick up right where this video stopped and walk you through that single financial thread, store by store. You can ask me your own questions, and I answer you myself. No bots. Folks like you are already in there with me. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen. Cancel anytime. One click. No risk. If stories like this matter to you, stay with me here on the channel. There's much more on the chains and stores quietly falling apart, and I'll keep bringing it to you.